Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Zach Mercurio. Zach is a researcher, a leadership development facilitator, and speaker specializing in purposeful leadership, mattering, and meaningful work. That is a trifecta. He's a senior fellow at Colorado State University's Center for Meaning and Purpose, where he's also an instructor in the Organizational Learning, Performance, and Change program. And he is the author of a great book, which I just finished, The Power of Mattering, How Leaders Can Create a Culture of Significance. Hey, Zach, welcome to the show.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish that more people knew that their next great leadership act is really in their next interaction.
And the way they make others feel is going to define their leadership, how they're seen by others.
Yeah, how they show up in the next interaction. We've asked many people, when you feel that you matter to someone, what are they doing? And they almost always talk about small interactions, not big actions. Small interactions in which they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued, they feel known by somebody else, by a leader. They don't usually talk about quarterly earnings reports or big product launches or getting an Employee of the Month award, or nobody said, I really felt like I mattered when I got my direct deposit or got more money. They talk about small interactions.
Okay, so the small things, they mean more, they matter more than these grand gestures.
They matter more to a lot of things. Like, even when we think about big things like employee engagement, it's really not a programmatic issue, it's an interactional issue.
Help me understand the business case for mattering, because it seems like mattering matters more now than ever before. Why is this something that leaders ought to be giving time and attention to?
If I were to summarize like the work motivation research over the last 50 years, I'd summarize it in one line, and that is that it is almost impossible for anything to matter to someone who doesn't first believe that they matter. It is hard for anybody to care about anything if they don't feel cared for. It is very hard for someone to sustainably add value if they don't feel valued. Think about the last time you went above and beyond for someone who didn't care for you. Think about the last time you worked really hard on something that you knew didn't quite matter, right? Mattering comes first. And it comes before many of the things we say we want in our organizations, the lagging indicators of profit, of performance, of productivity. All of those things are lagging indicators of how humans feel. Every metric is mediated through a human being. And I think that great leadership really comes down to meeting people's most fundamental needs first. And mattering is that fundamental need. In fact, mattering is a survival instinct first and foremost. Everybody listening right now mattered enough to someone to keep them alive. If they hadn't, they wouldn't be here. You know, from the moment we're born, we actually search to matter to someone else. That instinct, that survival instinct to feel cared for, turns into the fundamental need to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed.
Take someone who doesn't feel like they matter. How does that manifest at work? Would it be loneliness? Would it be a sense that I don't have any value?
Typically, two behaviors follow when we feel insignificant. We either withdraw or we act out in desperation. Quiet quitting, for example, is not the result of an entitled, lazy generation. Quiet quitting is the inevitable withdrawal response to people who feel insignificant.
That's interesting.
Feel unseen, unheard, unvalued. It's not a surprise that quiet quitting and the lying flat movement in China arose when more people than ever say they feel invisible at work, unseen, unheard, undersupported. There was a work human study in 2023 that found that 30% of people feel quote unquote invisible in work. Gallup's latest engagement report found engagement was at its lowest rate in a decade. This is despite $1 billion being spent on engagement programs, well-being programs over that same time period. And one data point stands out. Just 39% of people said that someone at work cared for them as a person. So if people don't feel cared for, if people don't feel that they matter, they typically withdraw. Silence, withholding, isolating. or it results in acts of desperation, things that are called toxic behaviors like complaining, blaming, gossiping, protesting. A lot of these are the language of the unheard and the unseen. If I can't speak up to you, I'll speak out to someone else. I'll do anything, because mattering is a survival instinct. I'll do anything to find a relationship where I feel seen and heard. And so this is important for leaders, because all of the things we say we want, profit, productivity, engagement, are all lagging indicators of how human beings feel and human energy. And there's few things more energizing than knowing that you and what you're doing matter, in my opinion.
So you lay out a 3-part process in the book for showing others that they matter. And the first part is noticing. And I guess that's the first sign that a person is seen, right? That they matter. So paying attention pays. It leads to some of the other things we've already addressed, like the engagement and the work satisfaction. But how do leaders actually become better noticers?
It's a good question. I'd also add it's necessary for trust.
Uh-huh.
This stuff is nice to do, but it's not nice to do just because it's nice to do. It actually is like the bedrock of trust and trusting teams, which is the foundation of everything else. There's research that shows that if you don't feel like someone has your best interests at heart or cares about you, trust is virtually impossible, no matter how competent that person is. A lot of times we over-index on competence when it comes to building trust and under-index on care. But trust is almost impossible scientifically without care. So that noticing practice is the practice of seeing and hearing people. It's a little bit different than knowing somebody. You can know your team members, but not notice that someone's struggling. You can know your best friend, but not notice that they've been talking a little bit less, or they've not as energized in what they're doing. Noticing is a deliberate act of making the space and time to connect with people, of paying deep attention, relearning how to pay deep attention to people, asking questions of people that actually give you the meaningful data so you can see them, checking in on how they're doing. And when you notice a struggle, offering acts of compassion to help. I mean, that's really what noticing is.
So it's almost like the empathy of noticing, really having that sense of who is this person, what do they need, and am I aware enough and sensitive enough to what they need to fill those needs and see them.
And then it's active. We do something. So it's observing people, observing the details, ebbs and flows of people's life and their work. It's having some way to remember those things, and then it's sharing back and checking in and remembering someone. One of the things that, and we were talking about this before we went on, but one of the lessons that I learned from a leader in my work was I was asked to go to this distribution center, really high disengagement on their engagement surveys, all across their teams except for one team. It was like clearly an outlier. And I went to that team and I just said, what is going on here? And they all said some non-scientific version of, it's our supervisor. She just gets us. We'd do anything for her. And I went to her and I was expecting some like major practice, like, tell me what you do here so I can just spread it across the organization. And she pulls out this old moleskin notebook and she goes, on Friday mornings, I would, first of all, she said, I was having trouble 3 years ago remembering everything about my employees. She has a team of like over 20 people. She goes, so on Friday mornings, I take out this notebook and I write down their names. One thing I heard them talk about, if it was a kid starting a new sport, a piece of equipment that they were struggling with, and we promised we'd get it fixed. If there was a meeting they were nervous about, I'd write it down. And then on Monday, I start my week reading that list, reading each of those things I noted, and then I follow up with about a 3-minute micro check-in with them. And I just say, hey, I remembered last week we wanted to get that piece of equipment fixed for you. Did that get taken care of? And she told me there's magic in being remembered. She's learned that there's magic in being remembered. And I love that because it's a process, it's a practice, it's a discipline of noting, of relearning how to pay attention. And that's just one example of how you can observe the details of people's lives, note them, and then share them back.
Yeah. And it's deliberate.
It's deliberate and it's scalable. Like someone else can do it. You don't just rely on intuition. A lot of times in organizations, we rely on intuition for people to lead, but intuition doesn't scale very well. Practice does.
Yes.
Yes. And that's what I love about that is that these are practices, they're skills. And we often don't get taught them in school.
And it's a choice because, you have this one leader making a conscious, deliberate effort to notice and to remember and to find that magic in the remembering. If that's what you do, there's going to be a natural consequence of that, a positive natural consequence.
I once worked with a supervisor of a cleaning crew that cleans the airplanes when they come on the plane. I followed her around for a day, and she would go around every single person she talked to. She'd say, "What do you need from me today?"
Hmm.
So that's another deliberate practice, right? Asking better questions instead of like, "How are you?" or "How was your day?" or "How's it going?" Or I see a lot of leaders start meetings with, "How's everybody doing? Good?" Right? Can you imagine if you weren't good? Or "I hope you're doing well." Like, the last thing I need is your hope. But if we need to go beyond the greetings and ask questions people can answer, what do you need from me today? What is your attention today? What are you struggling with? How can I help? Um, what can I stop doing? What can I start doing to make your job easier today? Uh, you know, those just simple ways of optimizing interactions can make a big difference.
You talked about in the book a couple of questions that you asked your son. And I really like the questions because not a lot of parents ask these kinds of questions. One was, who did you help today? And the other is, who helped you? Why do you ask those questions?
Well, first of all, I had a preschooler at the time, and we were just starting to like have conversations about our days. He was just becoming like conscious of the world,
Right.
and I realized I would pick him up from preschool and I would ask him questions like that I ask people I work with, which is like, "How was your day? What did you do today?" And if you follow a question to its end, like that question, all I would have ever gotten was a list of things he did. All I would have ever gotten was some general answer. Because when I ask you, "How was your day?" I'm really asking, how was the last 8 hours of living a complex human life? So when people ask you, like, "How are you?" That's why most people say, "Good, you." It's just too much for our brains to handle.
What are you supposed to say?
Right. But the questions I started asking as I was researching mattering was, who did you help today and who helped you today? And the first week, nothing happened, which was kind of demoralizing. But then he started telling me about like the people that he helped build a Lego tower with, his friend's name. He told me he was a line leader. I didn't even know he had jobs until I started asking that question. He was so excited about that. One week he was a weather watcher, and we had real conversations. And one day I remember he got in the car and I started to ask the question. He goes, Dad, I can't think of who helped me today. I'm going to have to look harder tomorrow."
Yeah.
And what I love about that is what I realized is that the questions we ask people and ourselves actually direct our attention.
Yeah.
And he was paying attention to what mattered. And through that question, he also realized how he mattered and who he helped. And that's a key part of mattering. Mattering has two sides. It's feeling valued by those around us, and then knowing how we add value.
Know your value and the
Know
value that you
know
bring.
how you add value. And then as a
Mhm.
leader, helping people see how they're valued and helping them see how they add value. And that
And
noticing practice that we've been talking about is really about helping people feel valued. It's that first part.
and I imagine that if I were to ask one of our boys, "Hey, who did you help today?" and they had to stop and think about that, then it directs their attention to, well, maybe I didn't do as much helping today as I might have done. Tomorrow's another day. Let me try again.
Yeah, absolutely. And they
Yeah.
think I can help. And that's a key belief in mattering, is the belief that that it's called self-efficacy, the belief that you're capable.
So I'm wondering what can be done at an organizational level beyond the standard recognition and rewards programs that are already in place. How do you see mattering playing out inside companies today? What are some things that they can do to standardize the practice of not only understanding how we matter, but making others feel the same?
Yeah, so I know we talked about the noticing practice. The second practice is affirming people, which is making sure people see how they make a unique difference, and then making sure that people are feeling needed. And there are skills for each of those. And sometimes those skills can be mined out of your own organization based on how people feel there. So one of my favorite things to have people do is to think about, in the organization that you're a part of, when you feel that you matter as a leader, what is happening? What is happening around you here? And once you identify those things, categorizing those skills that are needed to make those moments possible for everybody. And an example is, we worked with a big travel agency that works on business travel. They were coming out of the pandemic. Travel agents. Morale was low. People were really struggling. And the senior vice president called me and said, Zach, I think this is a mattering problem. I think we need to make sure people feel that they matter again. So that was the question that we launched into this process with. How do we make sure people feel that they matter again? What we did is we got all the leaders together. We asked them to think about a moment in their work when they most felt that they mattered, what was happening around them. Right. And just giving people that anchor, that emotional anchor of what mattering feels like, can be a powerful jumping off point. And then we brought them back, and under each of those practice areas, noticing, affirming, and needing, we asked them to identify 5 behaviors that they'll commit to make sure everyone feels noticed, affirmed, and needed. And we had like 200 behaviors, and we analyzed that data into 5 for noticing, 5 for affirming, 5 for needing. And then we created a How People Matter Here blueprint, and we gave it to all the employees and said, this is what you can expect from your leaders. And then we did 2 assessments. We had the leaders self-assess on those behaviors, frequency of those behaviors every 2 weeks. We had employees assess their leaders on those behaviors, and they talked about it.
And that's the key.
And they talked about it. And then this turned into how they develop their leaders. So the skills, the behaviors that leaders were scoring lower on, those were the skills that informed their personal and professional development. They designed for mattering. And they saw a 50% reduction in attrition in a year and a half, and a sustainable increase in engagement. And what they did is they systematized this. They designed their systems to make the behaviors to create mattering both possible and determined that they will occur.
And it didn't take grand gestures.
This was the most troubling financial time they've had as a company. And they got through it because they doubled down on making sure that people felt that they mattered, which research shows is absolutely critical for resiliency. And often in difficult times, like uncertain times, a lot of times people are like, oh, we don't have the resources to invest in culture. But you invest in culture precisely for the difficult times.
The book is The Power of Mattering, and the author, and he has made me think about how to make others matter more, is Zach Mercurio. Zach, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thank you, Joe.